Welcome back, Patreons, to the Spotlight. This is our opportunity to talk to creators in the genre space, and I'm super psyched to be connecting with Larry Hama, or Hama or Hama. I've never heard it correctly.
Hama.
Hama.
You were wrong
This is Larry.
twice.
This is Larry Hama. You see me not doing my pre-roll. I should have watched some audio or something, so I apologize. But
It's the
anyway,
same it's the same Hama that's in Yokohama.
Yokohama. God, I will never forget again. You
Okay.
should have heard me killing J.M. DeMatteis's name, which I've also said incorrectly when I interviewed him a number of weeks ago. I'm bad. I know. I had to take
I
notes.
thought it
I
was
feel
the
terrible.
Mattis.
It might be DeMatteis. He also gave us a fake name that he used once when he attached it to a story that he wasn't very happy about.
We we've I've always called him the Mattis, and he's never corrected me, so
Then I will take your word for it. But anyway, it's great to sit down with you. You and I met back in 2019 here in Michigan, which is where I'm based at a Comic Con on the campus of my alma mater, which is Michigan State University. I don't know if it rings a bell.
mhm.
Probably not.
It all tends to blend together after a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. But in addition, I was in costume that day. I was a used to be a pretty avid cosplayer, but when you had a panel that day, and it was funny. We were all sitting there, and there was nobody who was hosting the panel, so I just kind of jumped in and asked a question to get the ball rolling.
Mhm.
And I asked you about, and I'll ask you about it again to kind of tell for our listeners, if you don't mind, how G.I. Joe, a real American hero, kind of got its spark from Nick Fury and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's a great story if you don't mind sharing it.
Well, what do you mean by the spark?
Well, it was well, I mean, there was interconnectivity, I should say.
Well, in a vague way. I mean,
Okay.
um, I was editing Crazy magazine at Marvel, and I was trying to get other writing work. Uh, Nobody would give me writing work. They
Mm.
said, "No, you're an artist. We can't have you guys writing because all the editors were writers." See, and letting the artists write would be like spitting in their own wallets.
Oh, jeez.
Um, so I proposed a new book uh, that was like uh, Nick Fury's son, who's a special operator working for a sort of organization like Delta, and I created like about 8 characters for that team. Um, a heavy machine gunner, a female intelligence officer, so on and so forth. And they had a secret base under the chaplain's assistant school in Staten Island.
Oh, yeah.
I even drew a diagram of the base, and I submitted it, and then it was flatly rejected.
Oh, jeez.
So I was just sitting around, and then when Hasbro came to Marvel and wanted to do a GI Joe book, um, I was still totally unsuccessful in being able to get writing work, even though I was a full editor at
Right.
the time. And um, they so Hasbro made this presentation to Marvel and said, like, we want Marvel to just do it. We are very good at doing toys, but we don't know jack about comics, and you guys are the best at doing comics, so we'll let you just do it. So it was a pretty open thing. I thought any writer would jump at that, but what I hadn't realized was that in those days, and still true today, the licensing fee comes off the top of the page rate.
Ooh, ouch.
So no A list or B list or even a C list creator, they'd be stupid to, to take on a project where they got paid less.
Right.
You know,
No, I understand.
if they're like an A list or B list guy at that time, they were getting plenty of work. So why would they take a pay cut to do
Right.
something that it was common knowledge in both the toy industry and the comics industry that a toy licensed book never lasted more than a year for a
A
number of reasons.
yeah.
First, all because they were crappy. You know? you
And
couldn't
you
get
changed
anybody,
that, did you ever?
you couldn't get anybody good to work on. You can't. When you think of like a pre GI Joe toy license comic, or any licensed comic. So Jim Shooter went to. Oh, before that, Jim Shooter had given me a letter of dispensation saying that I could write comics for other comic book companies while I was still an editor. This is unheard of.
Oh my goodness.
So I got my first writing work from Louise Simonson, who was then um, uh, uh, Wheezy Jones.
Mhm.
And she was an editor at Warren Comics, and she had like Creepy and Eerie. So I did a
Okay.
series for her at Eerie. But then Hasbro, came into Marvel, and Shooter went to every um, contract writer. They all turned it down. He went to every
Yeah.
non-contract writer. They all turned it down. Then he
Oh
went.
my god.
They started at the other end of the building. The office, the editorial offices were in a row all along the outer edge. So all the editors had windows. Okay,
Mhm.
and he asked all the editors and the assistant editors and the kid that went out to get coffee and even the kid that went out to get coffee turned it down. But my office was the absolute last office in the row, and he got to me and I accepted it. And I've said it a dozen times that if it had been Barbie, I would have taken Barbie. You know, it,
My wife is a huge Barbie fan, so that
I,
would have been
and
spectacular.
I would have given it my best shot. The thing,
Yeah.
I'd come up through Wally Wood and Neil Adams Studios, and um, if you're familiar with their work, you understand that to them there is no B game. You
Mhm.
give it your best effort, or or not. They were both known to put in a lot of effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? And so that's how I approached it. I said, this is I. I'm not going to hack this out. I'm going to give it the best effort I can. Um, and it worked. You
Yeah,
know,
it did. Oh my god.
within a year, it was the top selling book in the country.
All right.
Um, and that's when I went back and I said, "Look, doesn't this prove anything? Can't I get more other writing work now?" And they said, "Well, no, GI Joe is a total fluke." So I kept bugging them, and after another year, they said, "Oh, look, like we're tired of you complaining. There's this book that we're about to cancel." It's like, it's really
Oh, great. Give it to me.
going down in sales, and I don't. We don't think you can mess it up any more than it is, and that's how I got Wolverine.
Oh, oh my.
So
One of the
yeah, so
enormous success, my god.
within a year, Wolverine is like the number two book selling book in the country. So I go back again and I say, "Hey, doesn't this prove something?" And they say, "Oh no, Wolverine is a fluke.
Oh my
He's,
god.
he's not like any of the other X Men. Blah blah blah." You and I said, "Well, you're so you're touting the X-Men all the time, but like when I go into the licensing and merchandising office, um, 90% of the licenses are for Wolverine products. Yeah,
You weren't supposed to see that.
Wolverine. They had Wolverine mugs and T-shirts and lunch boxes and
Right.
everything under the sun. But try finding you know um, a Phoenix,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
or the guy that shoots beams out of his eyes.
The Cyclops, yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, nobody knew anything about him
yeah.
until
I
those
mean,
movies, yeah.
uh, they're so they like sort of fell by the wayside when they started making the tentpole movies. You know, after a couple of you know X Men movies, they figured out nobody's really interested in these other guys. And so subsequently, the next two X Men movies were Wolverine movies.
Yeah, you think? And then all the ones after that too until
Yeah, so
yeah.
but the thing that held true was that uh, they told me when I was taking on GI Joe that if I took on a toy book, I would never be offered an A-list book again because uh, doing a licensed book is like the stamp of you know no good.
Yeah.
And
The
they were right.
biggest book in the
I
industry.
was never offered an A-list book at Marvel ever.
Yeah.
While
God.
it was an A-list book, you know, um,
Yeah.
I made a bunch of them into A-list books.
Exactly. It's just crazy.
I mean, the third book that they tried to pawn off on me because it was having really bad sales was the Avengers.
Now the biggest movie franchise of all time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I mean, and during the entire 155 issue run at Marvel, I didn't get invited to a single major con,
Wow.
not
The
once.
biggest book in the industry.
And I never got a write up in any fanzine. I mean, it was
Uh,
as if all the books that I worked on didn't exist
oh
to the
my gosh.
gatekeepers fandom. Not even Wolverine.
Wow. Which is just such an enormous character, even not
Yeah, but you got to understand that the gatekeepers, there were a different generation of gatekeepers.
right. I
You
get it.
know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the kids, the 10-year-old kids that were actual readers,
Hmm.
got to be in their 30s and into their 40s that they had
People like me.
all this
Yeah.
disposable income, and they said, "Hey, you know, I'll buy a complete hardcover set."
Right, exactly. I funded that Kickstarter last year,
Right?
which I think you might actually be able to see behind if I tilt to the side. It's right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
yeah. But
Be,
if anybody had asked me in
right.
1982, if somebody had told me that in 2020 something you would be able to sell a $300
Exactly.
collection
Beautiful leather brown,
of
looks like
a
Shakespeare,
toy license book,
Right.
that would have been unheard of. In fact, the common sense knowledge in the toy industry was that no matter how good a toy line was, it couldn't last more than 3 years. Okay, because
So
they've had,
arbitrary.
uh, because they all you had to do was look around and see like all those warehouses full of Cabbage Patch dolls that nobody wanted, you know, and all those warehouses and landfills full of those Thai um,
These days it's those Funko
uh,
Pops. They're just
Beanie
dumping them in
Babies,
landfills. Yeah,
Beanie
Beanie Babies.
Babies, yeah,
Yeah.
and and this Funkos are still going strong, but there's lots of people whispering, how long could this last?
What goes
You
up
know?
must come down. I mean, the GI
Yeah.
Joe, I started collecting the new line that came out a couple of years back. Until I mean, you can't see on the exact opposite side of me. I have them displayed, and I did the Kickstarter. I have the Dragonfly, I have the Hiss Tank, and it's so vibrant. And those things are all huge sellouts because they're
Mhm.
still, as you said, people who are my age. I'm 49, so I was 6 in 1982 when that first GI Joe comic came out, and that with Star Wars and Indy, I was reading licensed properties before I ever started
Yeah,
reading Spider-Man when I
sure.
turned 10. So I was always the
Well,
exception to the rule. I helped push it forward, the licensed stuff.
yeah, but 1980 and 1982 were the tipping points for licensed books because all of a sudden, you had Star Wars. People were buying
Right.
that comic.
My first comic. Yeah.
And and then Transformers happened.
Mhm.
That was huge, right?
Mhm.
And then you realize that Marvel turned down Indiana Jones the first time around.
I mean, they eventually did publish it, but it was a couple of years after.
Yeah,
I think it came out in
after that,
83 or end of 82. Yeah.
because I was at the meeting where you know we sort of decided which um, movie properties we were going to do as Marvel Comics adaptations.
Yeah.
Sort of like triage. You'd get like many more. Studios would send us uh, everything in trying to get us to do an adaptation. You know,
Right.
because I don't think DC was really doing them. Marvel was
I,
the only one that
I
really
think
did
they
them.
had Star Trek, and I'm a big Star Trek guy, but
Yeah,
that was the only one I can really think of.
but they did movies. We did
Right.
movies too. We did like the James Bond movies and
Right.
stuff like that. And I also drew when there was a remake of The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And so we got in like these, we had to like boil it down to like five that we could do, and we got like 15, 20,
Okay.
possible.
Oh boy.
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencaster. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencaster is now the all in one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web based podcasting solution, provides high quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio quality content all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencaster because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencaster has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencaster? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of Zen knowing Zencaster's multi layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencaster's post production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with the click of a button. So, if you're interested in making an easy, high quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to zencaster.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
So they got all the editors together. We're at this meeting and we're looking at all these things, and you got to understand that when you're just reading a script dry, it
Right.
it can't sit there on the page. Um, I knew the guy that wrote Animal House,
Oh,
and Doug. He was an editor in the Lampoon, and Doug Kenny, and he we had gone to see Blondie at the CBGB's.
Oh,
A
wow.
whole bunch of us. We had started out at the Bells of Hell, which was a National Lampoon hangout, and about half a dozen of us, you know, were at CBGB's, and we closed CBGB's. It's like 3 in the
Part
morning or something.
Oh my gosh.
Doug says, "Well, let's all go to my place," and so we went to his place, which is a townhouse in the village, and we're sitting around having drinks and smoking, and just chilling out,
Yeah.
and Doug says, I wrote this screenplay, and I put my own money into it, and you want to take a quick read, and I started reading this thing, and I got to the part where there's a fucking food fight going on, and because if you don't see John Belushi
Right.
saying these lines, they're like, you
It doesn't
know,
make any sense. Yeah.
this
It
this
doesn't.
fool is standing up and yelling food fight.
Right. Right.
I remember feeling really sorry for him that he put his own money into this thing that was obviously going to be a total flop. That was animal. So anyway, we were looking at these possible movies, and one of them was a thing called Meteor, which had Sean Connery and Natalie Wood and
Oh
a
my
dozen
gosh.
big name stars from the time, and the the major still that they supplied was this aerial shot of Manhattan Island with this giant smoking crater in the
Oh
middle,
God.
with helicopters buzzing around it, and
That'll sell it.
yeah. So we said, "Oh yeah, we got to do that." And then we looked at this other one and says, "Oh, this is about some archaeologist." And he's looking for some box the ancient Hebrews buried around in the desert. You know, we thought, oh, it. We looked at that. And said, oh, the it, um, Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark, right? So we thought, oh,
Yeah.
and when we found out it was this box, everyone said, "It's not Noah's Ark."
That would
it's
have been
some
easier to find.
it's some stupid box, some magical box, you know, and and the bad guys are Nazis. Come on, give us a break.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea. It's
Yeah,
hilarious.
well, that's how it read. So
Yeah.
we rejected that and opted for Meteor instead.
Well, it had that great visual,
Yeah,
smoking crater. Yeah, it's just selling the sizzle, not the steak, right?
yeah, and had all these big name stars.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is hilarious. So I'm still thinking about GI Joe because it's been 40, 43, 44 years since that ball got rolling, and you're
Mhm.
still writing it because you've got the new series because I've been reading it. And then you did 155 issues. There were special missions. Then you picked up and did another 150, and then it started again just recently. So you've written and you did most of that original Marvel run, with the exception of an issue here, an issue there, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken. Besides what might be, an obvious answer, like the two-parter with Snake Eyes or the silent issue or something. What's a standout story or an issue that maybe you don't necessarily think about or talk about, that's one that you really loved?
Well, obviously, the ones that I really like are 21 and 26, which is
Right.
Silent Interlude and the origin of Snake Eyes.
Right.
Um, I would say the Michael Golden yearbook really,
Okay, yeah, the first one.
yeah, where,
Yeah.
where their foes are the October Guard.
Yeah.
And I remember we got a lot of bad mail on that from kids.
It's the Russians. Mm.
No, 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 no. They didn't like the artwork.
Oh, I that was the second yearbook. I remember now, because the
Yeah,
first yearbook I think
the
just
first
reprinted
one
the
was
first
like
issue.
reprints.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
second
exactly.
yearbook was this incredible Michael Golden
I
story.
remember how unique the art was. That came out in '85, so I was 9,
Yeah,
and an avid fan of the toys and the book, and I was like, it was really, it was very different, and I liked it. Even as a
yeah.
kid, I liked it.
A lot of kids thought it was. They used the word cartoony.
Maybe, but I don't think they took away from it.
To a 10-year-old boy, cartoony means kitty.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same reason why Hasbro didn't want to do Scarlet at first because they thought if it's a female, that's not an action figure, that's a doll, and
Oh,
you know,
boy.
no 10-year-old boy is gonna want to be caught dead playing with a doll. So
Tish, tish. Forget about it. So, my partner was going to join us tonight, but he's my counterpoint and ask like the questions that are a little deeper. Do you remember the Marvel amalgam thing that happened in the
yeah,
late '90s?
yeah, I did two of
Yeah,
them, I think. Yeah.
yeah. There was just a big omnibus that came out, and my partner bought it, and he wanted me to ask you about Dark Claw and Bat Thing.
And which and who?
He said I remember Dark Claw. I don't remember what Bat Thing is. My partner, he's not always so good
That
at
thing.
he's
Yeah.
not always so good at putting his thoughts together, but he wanted me to ask you, like, you spent so much time at Marvel and then you're collaborating with DC in this instance. What was that like?
Um, well, first of all, I'd been an editor at DC before I was an editor at Marvel.
That's right.
I was editor of Wonder Woman and Super Friends and uh,
My first cartoon, Super Friends.
a bunch of other stuff. And so, and also, everybody worked for both companies, basically.
Yeah, it was not as really different as people
So
would like to
everybody
think.
in those days, we knew everybody in the business.
Yeah,
It wasn't like, oh, we're going to have to do this, uh, you know, these books with total strangers.
yeah,
Yeah. It was just like a regular job. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, the fun thing was like, these fun combinations of characters. So,
yeah. Yeah, that's a cool story. I have not revisited those in a really long time. This was his other question, and he's going back to the '70s on this one, and I will admit that I am not as familiar. But Bucky O'Hare from 1977.
yeah, what about it?
He says his question was, jumping from a 1977 idea to a comic book in '84, and then to a cartoon and a toy line in a video game. He says, would you, if you had the opportunity, would you ever bring it back?
Well, yeah, because I own, uh, I own 25% of it.
Well, all right.
You know, I mean
So
that
that's
meant
a big yes.
that meant that for every dollar that came in, I got a quarter.
Hey,
And
it's a
we sold 100 licenses. We sold big wheel trikes, shampoo, um, coloring books, uh, you know, those tracing sketch pads with the plastic thing that you like lift it
the
off,
it not it. Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
that
I
was
know the one
called.
you and then you pull it loose. I had those. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So, and we sold the Nintendo license in 8, 16, and 32 bits
Oh my
worldwide.
gosh. That's
Yeah,
retro. That's awesome.
yeah.
Is that character exist anywhere else these days? I mean, are there comics out there? Is the cartoon available anywhere?
They came out with the toys again.
Oh, okay.
A whole new line of Bucky O'Hare toys.
Okay. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
I apologize. That's
And they're
awesome.
terrific. They're
Yeah.
I think they're better than the originals.
I hasten to say it, but the, I mean the G, of course, the GI Joe ones, the classified that are being produced now, they're so different because you can't even really compare. They started, as I'm sure you noted, they trying to redesign some things, but eventually they gravitated back to just making them look like they did in the '80s because that's what guys like us want to actually spend money on. You know what I mean? So I bet they've done I mean, the vehicles they've done in particular, like to the Dragonfly and the Hiss or the Vamp are just awesome. They're unbelievable.
Yeah,
And
because why it doesn't make any sense to like redo a character
Right.
visually from the ground up. I
Right.
mean, the reason people like those older figures was because of what they looked like. I mean, if you're going to redo them, make them better versions
Exactly.
of the old product rather than you know uh, steamrolling over everything.
Right.
And
Reinventing the wheel for no reason at all. So you were talking a little bit earlier about Marvel and Wolverine, some X-Men, Avengers, which you mentioned. You did some work on Venom. I found the name of a book, Kitty Pryde, Agent of Shield, which I definitely have to go see if I can find because that sounds awesome. Any Marvel character that you never really dug into that you would be like, oh man, I wish I'd had a chance to tackle, you know, a longer run on the Fantastic Four, or, more with Spider-Man or something like that.
well, I never got a chance to work on Fantastic Four.
Mm.
I, that was one of the comics that I bought as a kid.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I'm
know,
actually doing a read right now. I'm reading the John Byrne run, because
oh,
he
I'm
he's
talking
a
about before. I'm talking about. I never read the John Byrne run.
oh,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
he did
talking
some
about Kirby back in the '60s.
yeah, oh no, I totally get. Now he did some great stuff and I've read those as well. But yeah, I'm a huge fan with the movie coming up. It's just been in the trailer came out the other day. It looks absolutely fantastic. So, I mean,
Well, the
I'm
comics
psyched.
that I bought were like Uncle Scrooge, um, uh, Sergeant Fury, Sergeant Rock, Our Army Next
Right.
War, Journey into Mystery,
Oh gosh.
Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and I didn't really get into X-Men,
Yeah.
back then.
I
Much
mean,
later.
yeah. It doesn't resemble what it became because it was very different. It was another kind of the characters were all teenagers, like Spider-Man was a teenager,
Yeah.
and then it focused more to being adult characters like Wolverine or Storm or whatever it is in the 70s and the 80s, and as all of us were growing up too, so kind of moved along with us. So well, this has been fantastic. So you're still working on the GI Joe book. Do you have any other projects going on right now that we can let people know about?
I'm working on three 150-page graphic novels for Abrams
Oh
that are
wow.
based on Japanese, Chinese, and Korean fairy tales.
Oh,
So,
fantastic.
I took I created a character called the Fox Princess. The foxes or the kitsune in Japanese myth were shape changers, shapeshifters. And, uh, they had this whole other society going. So I thought there was a beautiful segment in Akira Kurosawa's Dreams about a kid that witnesses the wedding procession of the foxes. It's this really incredible mystical thing through in the forest.
Yeah,
Oh, I can
that's
really
awesome.
take off on that. And
Yeah,
and there's all these wonderful Japanese ghost stories and horror stories and monsters, and same thing with Korean folklore and Chinese. So actually, the Monkey King, a variant of the Monkey King, is a character in it also, um, and it's an adventure. It's a quest.
hmm,
Um, the basic structure is almost the same as Lord of the Rings. It's
yeah, okay,
the first volume is the gathering the crew to go on this quest. The second volume is the quest itself.
right,
Uh, the third volume is bringing it all back home.
gotcha. Wow,
Um, so I'm in the midst of dialoguing the second volume. It's,
okay. Will they come out first volume? It would be kind of like first volume a year later, the second one, the third
yeah,
one after that, or so. Okay, gotcha. So when will the first one be something that people can get their hands on?
I have no idea.
That's an honest answer.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
um, I'm working on that. I'm working on two other 120-page graphic novels.
Holy cow!
Um,
Wow.
one
Now
of
you're writing and drawing as well, or
no, no, I wrote it. I did one with Mark Bright, and
Okay. Yeah, I know Mark Bright.
we're talking with Boom
Okay.
about publishing it. Um, they really seem to be very interested, and well, more than interested, they sent us a contract. So,
Fantastic. Congrats. Good
uh,
deal.
and that's a superhero uh, story that that Mark sort of came up with the base characters, and I sort of expanded on it and made it into a graphic novel.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, Mark passed away last year,
Mm.
but he did finish the entire thing and one cover. So,
Oh boy. Wow. Well, that will really be something when it hits the skids, or when it comes out. That'd be totally awesome. So, well, this has been incredible. Thank you, man, so much for your time. Where do people? If you, it's funny. I would like to ask this question. If you want people to find you, where would people find you? Like on social media, for example.
I have a Facebook page.
Okay.
I have a private Facebook page, and then I have sort of a fan page. It's open
Okay.
to anybody. It's the fan page is Larry. Been faking it all my life, Hama.
Right. I think I remember it. And I think that's how I found you. That a combination of that and my interview with Tom DeFalco, and he and I talked. That's how I found you.
Okay.
But I'm very grateful for this opportunity to sit down with you. So thank you. I'll sign off, but I'll say, Patreons, thanks for tuning in. If you're listening to this on our free feed, listeners, do visit patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. You can try us out for 7 days for free. And listen to great conversations like this one I've had with Larry Hama. Larry, have a great evening. Thank you
Hama.
for making the time. Hama.
Hama.
Too many years of saying it the wrong way. Larry Hama. Hama.
Hama.
Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good
Bye.
night.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.